A lot of people at that time got very frustrated about what Nigel did, and said that support for Tommy Robinson or Katie Hopkins could, could cause you to fail vetting.
Hello, welcome, and thanks for joining. My name is Richard Thomson, and over the last few weeks, I've been looking at interviewing a number of ex-Reform UK candidates, organisers, campaigners, and things like that. Today, I'm joined by Malcolm Featherstone. So thanks, Malcolm, for joining us. If you don't mind, if you could just give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, Malcolm Featherstone, previously the parliamentary candidate for Reform in Harlow, and for a while the interim chair for the branch in Harlow. So mixed background. I won't go into it all. I'm retired now, but had a bit of an eclectic career, I guess you'd say.
Okay, interesting. Well, let's stick with the reform side of it, or the politics side of it.
Sure.
When did you first get involved in politics? If we start there.
Yeah, I got involved in 2019 really, as a result of sort of being really angry and frustrated about the establishment attempting to overthrow the results of the referendum. Um, I had voted to leave the EU, but I must admit, coming up to the referendum, in my mind, I'd had arguments both ways. So I actually wasn't totally sure which way I was going to vote. But once we'd all voted and there was a result, and I do consider referenda to be, I guess, the sort of pinnacle of democracy. I couldn't believe the reaction of the establishment in trying to overturn it. So I joined the Brexit Party, initially just to support the Brexit Party and its aim to try and see Brexit through. And then, they were asking for people to be candidates. And so I became the candidate for Saffron Walden, where I live was in the Saffron Walden constituency then. So I was the prospective parliamentary candidate for Saffron Walden and one of the 317 that got stood down in 2019, which was frustrating really, because we weren't getting Saffron Walden was Kemi Badenoch's constituency. We weren't going to remove her, but by taking a candidate away, myself and a lot of other people in Saffron Walden had no one to vote for, so I ended up spoiling my ballot paper. I didn't vote for Kemi. Wasn't going to vote for the Conservatives. So I think a lot of people at that time got very frustrated about what Nigel did. Maybe understood the reasoning behind it, but was still very frustrated at the outcome of that. So that was when I
Yeah.
first got involved. Was then.
Had you done a lot of sort of campaigning in the build up for that election? Was there a lot of groundwork that was done, I suppose, nationally as well as locally for Saffron Walden by yourself?
Yeah, I mean, all the campaigning for the Brexit Party was really locally. The National Party didn't have the resources or infrastructure to support. In Essex, quite a few of us candidates actually got together and helped each other out. So, and I'd got not a large team, but a small team of volunteers helping me with campaigning. And yeah, we got underway. We were out doing street stalls. We were out leafleting, and yeah, it pulled the rug from us a bit. I mean, there were other candidates who'd done more than me. I've no doubt about that. Saffron Walden was well, I think you know the area. It's a large rural area. It's actually quite a difficult constituency to campaign in because you haven't got these concentrated urban areas, which are easier to both leaflet and street stall. But we put a fair amount of time and effort into it. So it was frustrating to have the rug pulled in the way that it was. Um, I think the hardest thing for me was that I'd built a team of people helping me out, and the party did then was they cancelled your access to the IT systems and then told you you'd been stood down. So you couldn't even send an email out to people who'd been helping you, thanking them for their efforts and explaining what was going on and why. It was just, you know, total sort of blackout, really. And that was very frustrating because, I think people felt just abandoned, really. And they had been abandoned.
Yeah. So after the Brexit Party, then obviously they rebranded to Reform UK, and your involvement continued with Reform.
Well, I didn't get back re-involved until 2022. I mean, after the 2019 election, Nigel seemed in a great hurry to wind the Brexit Party up, and I must admit, from the other candidates that I knew, we were quite frustrated at this because most of us felt politically homeless. Most of us felt the Brexit Party had the opportunity to turn into a genuine challenger party, and most of us were willing really to get our local branches up and running ourselves, our time, effort, and money, but we were never given that option. We weren't given that choice. Nigel decided to wind up the party, close it down as quickly as possible, and it was done at a right rush. So I sort of, well, I no longer had a vehicle to work in, so I sort of drifted away. And it was only when Richard Tice really seemed to be genuinely trying to get the party resurrected, up and running again, that I rejoined in October 2022, it was, and offered myself as a candidate because I think Richard Tice was genuinely, he was actively looking for candidates. He appeared at the time to be saying many of the right things, the sort of things that I felt needed to be done. And so I offered myself as a candidate, went through the vetting process, and got selected as I think they called us spokespeople at that time, but for Harlow, because where I live, there'd been boundary changes, and so um, it moved from what was the Saffron Walden constituency, which is now Northwest Essex, to Harlow. So I found myself as spokesperson for Harlow in March 2023. And then tried to get things going in Harlow from then on. So had some street stalls, did some meetings with local people. I must admit, it was a challenge at the beginning to get local members um, to attend meetings, but actually slowly built it up so that when the general election was called in 2024, actually a reasonable sized group of us had been meeting on a monthly basis anyway. So we weren't caught totally unawares for the 2024 election. In fact, we had already ordered some generic leaflets, and we'd done a couple of, well, I think 3 or 4 street stalls. So we were up and running in Harlow for the 2024 election. So yeah, not in a
Yeah.
bad place really.
Okay. And then obviously had the elections. I think obviously Essex did relatively well, significantly higher average of the vote share. So probably a testament to your long involvement campaigning local areas, and getting things up and running in the way you've described. But what sort of happened then, I suppose, after the election? When did, I suppose, when did it start to go wrong, for yourself?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to pinpoint it. So, I mean, after the election, actually locally, we were still meeting on a regular basis. We were actually meeting fortnightly, a sort of hardcore group, because we wanted to keep things going, and we were fortunate enough to have a by-election, local council by-election come up So it gave us some focus, something to campaign for. A local cat, the Labour MP, we switched from Tory to Labour. The Labour MP had been a local councillor, so he stepped down from that. So there was a vacancy. So we had the opportunity to do that. Um, I got, I mean, actually, the party made me the interim chair without asking me. I hadn't necessarily assumed that I would, have any ongoing role after the general election. But I think the party actually assumed that a lot of the parliamentary candidates would just carry on as interim chairs. So, given that we had got a sort of fairly motivated group of people together in Arlo, I wanted to keep that going. So I agreed to be the interim chair, went through the training, with several training sessions, did that, got access to, the chair's email, and um really from October we were having sort of regular branch meetings. We were waiting for the branch rules to come out so we could go through the process of electing officers, and we wanted to know, I guess, what were the boundaries of how we worked. But we were functioning. I'm sure there were branches further advanced than us, but we were a functional branch. If another by-election came up, we were, ready and prepared to fight it. So that it's difficult to know what was going wrong because, you know, the party had been sort of chasing me in a way. You be interim chair, you go to this training, you do this dissemination to your local members, and I was doing that even though I hadn't really intended to. And then I went to the Essex, we have a meeting of the chairs in Essex. I went to the Essex meeting. I think it was right either at the end of January or beginning of February, and the then sort of regional organizer had said something about the number of people who were failing vetting, and said that support for Tommy Robinson or Katie Hopkins could, could cause you to fail vetting because we'd asked him, why are so many people failing vetting? And I hadn't taken it too seriously, to be frank. I didn't intend to stand to be the um, chair when we had the branch elections because I felt I'd been at this for quite a long time, and it was time for someone younger to step up and do it. And my intention would be to support them, but I felt someone who could do it over the next 5 years should probably be doing. And I wasn't standing in any forthcoming. I mean, we still thought we were going to get local elections in Essex. I wasn't planning on standing because, in fact, I had more than enough local members who'd gone through vetting who wanted to be candidates. So I didn't need to do it. And I thought it was better to have more people as involved as possible. So rather than me bump someone else off, one of the division seats, I thought, well, I'll take a step back and just try and support everyone else in the branch doing this. So I didn't think I was going through vetting. I wasn't standing as an officer and I wasn't standing as a candidate. But a couple of weeks after we'd had that meeting of the Essex chairs, I got a phone call from Dave Holland, who just become the new regional organizer after there'd been some changes, and it was his sort of first week in the job, and he rang me to say, yeah, I'm sorry, I got to tell you this. You're standing out, you being stood down as the branch chair because you failed vetting. Now, I'd known something was up, and in fact, I'd messaged him earlier because I'd lost all my access to the party's systems, and I knew they all run on different servers, so I knew it wasn't, one server being down. I knew somebody had gone through and had taken away all my login credentials. So I knew something was up. So I was a bit surprised, so I said to Dave, I don't really understand this. I'm not planning on standing for the branch officers, and I'm not, standing as a candidate. So what's this about? Um, and he couldn't tell me anything other than he'd been given a list of 13 people, myself and 12 others, who'd failed vetting, and his job was to stand them down, and that was it.
Wow.
Um,
So first week in the job, 13 people to stand down. And
yeah,
am I right in saying that you had failed the vetting that you didn't even know that they were putting you through, as well as not telling you what you'd failed on?
that's correct. And I'd asked Dave Holland to chase up and find out. He came back and said he couldn't find out the reason, just that I'd failed vetting and it was serious. I had some contacts who I knew had some sort of ins into the Central Party. I went to them and they came back with the same message. Don't know why, don't know what it is, but you've failed vetting and it's serious. I was bemused because not only was there no reason to vet me, but I hadn't asked me for any updated details on my social media accounts. So they had no knowledge of what my social media accounts were, other than what I'd given in October 22, which was sometime distant in the past. I mean, I could have set up all sorts of new social media accounts subsequent to that. And I also know, I mean, back in, when I did get vetted, it was Kirsty Walmsley and her team who were doing the vetting. And actually, they went through a very thorough vetting process at that time. I know Nigel said subsequently, oh, we got some wrong uns during the general election because the vetting wasn't very good. Actually, Kirsty Walmsley and her team did very thorough vetting, including two face-to-face interviews with candidates. So I didn't believe it, to be perfectly
Hmm.
frank with you. They hadn't asked if I'd got a new X account or Facebook account or Instagram account or anything. So I didn't believe it. I it seemed like a made up easy excuse to me.
Yeah, it seems that way. I mean, my theory is that you have some candidates, there's some people that have been involved for some time, especially within the Brexit Party days, that are now involved with Reform UK, and that comes from a time when the party had a clear philosophy as to who they were. They
Mm,
knew who their identity was, and they knew what they stood for. And obviously, the same can't be said for how Reform UK is now. So I feel that those 13 people, with yourself included on that list, are probably people that are, perhaps maybe some people that had failed vetting for one reason or another, but the majority of them will be made up of people like yourself that haven't actually failed vetting, but actually they are passionate individuals that have been campaigning for traditional things that you would expect Reform UK to stand for, that the membership think that they stand for, but subsequently is a position in which they've now vacated and no longer believe in. And it's easier to have people that really sort of want to be involved in politics and are very malleable to suggest what their policies should be, which otherwise would not sit well with the grassroots or with those active members like yourself that have been involved for some time. That's
yeah,
what do you think of that?
no, I mean that's the conclusion I've sort of reached myself. I mean, I did a really deep trawl of all my social media afterwards, just to see if, after a glass or two of wine one evening, I'd, done something a bit intemperate. So I did a really deep trawl, going back a long way, going back to Brexit Party days. And there wasn't anything. And I'm not surprised there wasn't anything because, we'd had drummed into us at the Brexit Party just how, our sort of opponents would latch on to anything. And so what I tended to do was, make very vanilla posts. Often all I did was repost official party stuff. I didn't want anyone could hang on me, anyone could misinterpret and use against me. So if you'd gone through my social media, you would have found it to be incredibly bland and boring. And I can't think of anything else. I mean, I did a couple of interviews with a local online uh, paper, um, and I did a couple of radio interviews. But again, I was very sort of careful in what I said in all of those. So I don't believe this is a case of my having said or written anything that could bring the party into disrepute, which brings me to your theory. And in fact, that's been reinforced by a number of other people who I've become aware of suffered similar fates, but who I knew and knew to be good, solid people. And I think it's the fact that actually we are not these malleable, you know, um, foot soldiers that Nigel Farage seems to want. He wants cannon fodder, doesn't he? He wants people who he can just point in any direction he wants and who'll do what they're told. And if they come a cropper, then so be it. He doesn't care. So people, as you say, with more character who have their own, political philosophy and, political commitments, and they're troublesome to Nigel. And I think that's why, quite a number of really, I look around and see some really good people who were strong candidates general election and have been discarded. So your theory is the best one I've heard. It fits closest with what I've observed since what happened to me. So I think I'm just part of that batch, I'm afraid.
Mm. Well, it's an unfortunate I suppose step back from the direction in which they were heading in, but I suppose wary of time and looking to wrap up. So I will ask sort of one more thing.
Mm.
In your experience and how things have gone for the Brexit Party and then for Reform, the way you was treated and how others have been treated and things like that. Would you say that there's a way in which something can be done to sort of save the soul of reform, to sort of bring it back to in the direction in which it should be, or has it really gone too far now?
That's a that's a difficult question. I mean, the people in Reform are brilliant. I mean, I loved all the people I met, both as active members, those who were a bit more passive, and the people we met on the street. I mean, as a movement, there are so many politically disenfranchised people who need a political home. The movement is great, but the leadership is rotten, and the way the legal structure and the people at the top make it impossible to deal with. I mean, I knew we were in trouble as soon as we got the constitution at the annual conference, because that made it absolutely clear that although technically there was a way of removing Nigel, in practice the only way Nigel was going was if he decided to, and that has just been cast in stone. This pretense for creating a company limited by guarantee, looks it's a sop to democratization. The straight fact is the same people control it, and there's no way of changing that. So the head is rotten, and unless a way is found to remove the head, I think unfortunately reform is doomed, which is a shame because the movement and the people who make up the movement are brilliant, and it'd be lovely to give them something that they deserve, really, and they warrant. But I don't know how we do that, I have to say. I just hope we can find a way of doing so.
Absolutely, well said, and I don't think I could have said it better. So, thanks again, Malcolm, for joining us and telling us your story. And we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Richard. My pleasure. Cheers.